upon the nation's acceptance of Jesus as their Messiah, but the fact that they didn't accept him as their Messiah means that this program was put off a little bit. You can also, in terms of the kingdom of heaven is at hand, or near language, you can also jot down 4:17, Matthew 10:7, and Matthew 12:28. So all of these are building up to the rejection in the middle of the book of Matthew, where now the kingdom of heaven is going to be put off, and there will be kind of an intermediary step, namely the church age. So then it is not just seen as a now phenomenon. It is seen as something that will happen in the future. So Jesus kind of is talking about an apocalyptic future phase of the kingdom of heaven. The virgins are mentioned in verse 1, comparable to 10 virgins. This is, by the way, the word Parthenos, from which we get the word, or the Greek temple Parthenon, a temple to the virgin goddess of Athena, I believe it is. So it's the same word, Parthenos, Parthenon. So he's referring to Parthenos. Interesting note in verse 1, they took their lamps and they went out to meet the bridegroom. So, and I don't remember if we've talked about this on Wednesday evenings or on Sunday mornings, and it's just really interesting how 1 John keeps kind of overlapping with our study of parables on Wednesday evenings, but it's interesting, they're waiting for a person, not an event. They're waiting for someone to come, not just for something to come. And sometimes we're looking forward to eschatology, we're not looking forward to Christ. And Christ needs to be the focus of our anticipation, our excitement. Not just, hey, some cool things are going to happen to me in the future. The contrast between the girls, and I gave you some of these words here, number 1. We see in verses 2 and 3, 5 were foolish. I'm sorry, verse 2, 5 of them were foolish, 5 were prudent. The contrast there are 5 of them are moros, yes, from the same word we've discussed in the past. Some are phronimos, which is a word that is frequently used in Matthew. And obviously this foolish versus wise dichotomy is deeply, deeply embedded in Jewish literature, all the way back to the Proverbs, where the author of Proverbs sees 2 categories. You got foolish, you got wise. You got wicked, you got godly. I mean, there's no, well, he's a little godly, well, he's a little foolish. I mean, there's foolish and wise. You're one or the other. So he makes this stark dichotomy between the two categories of girls in verse 2. And then in verse 3, he's going to explain what that means. Because, and just really quickly, by the way, I don't think, it's interesting that he's not just focusing, as we've talked about several times, not just focusing on saved versus unsaved. Obviously, you can draw that conclusion, but the focus here isn't on what God has done for us in terms of our salvation. The focus is really on what we are doing in light of that. Are we living wisely by being prepared for what may be a protracted wait, or are we living foolishly? So we're not just talking about saved versus unsaved. And when at the end they're not allowed into the wedding banquet, I don't think that means that they've been consigned to hell necessarily. I think all that means is just, if we are not going to be watchful and if we're not going to wait, we're going to be closed off to the kinds of opportunities that God has for us. And we're going to be living out our foolishness rather than the prudence that God is expecting of us. So the contrast is really stark. The specific act of foolishness, what in the author's mind, as Jesus is saying this, what demarcates wise from foolish? Well, he says in verse 3, for, the word for is an explanation word. Well, here it is, for, when the foolish took their lamps, they took no oil with them. Verse 4, but the prudent took oil in flasks along with their lamps. So probably what is being pictured here is one of 2 things. These little tiny oil deals that little lamps that you might have seen, where you got to keep pouring the oil in, and you have a wick, and it just kind of keeps going. It doesn't, you don't want to have this big huge thing that you're carrying around and sloshing around. I mean, if you drop that, you could have an explosion on your hands practically. It was, you have your little bit of oil here, but then you have extra oil with you that you can continually refill it. Or some commentators said that it was kind of like a torch that you hold, but you have to keep dousing it with new portions of oil. Either way, whatever you were carrying wasn't going to last you the entire time unless you had extra supply of oil. And the ones that were prepared, the ones that were ready for whatever contingency might happen, namely the delay of the bridegroom, those ones that were wise had extra oil with them so that they could have their lamp on for longer. So while all the virgins were prepared to wait, 5 were ill prepared for a prolonged, a protracted wait. So apparently what's going to go on here is when the bride's father received some preliminary sense that the groom would come to get the girl, the bride's father would invite the wedding party. They would have the food there. They don't know exactly what time that evening the groom is coming, but they would have all the girls and everybody there waiting for the bridegroom to come and get the girl. So they knew about when he would come, but they did not know exactly when he would come. Now, this is interesting because Jesus in Matthew 24 is saying you need to know the seasons, you need to read the signs, you need to see that the end of the age is coming soon. He doesn't say exactly when that's going to happen, but he does give us some signs. You kind of need to have a general idea that the end is coming soon. But then the exact timing of that is up to the Father. We don't know that. Same thing with the bride's father. You give a general sense. Okay, the groom is going to be coming soon. We're going to get the guests together. We're going to wait for the groom to come. But we don't know exactly when that's going to happen. So that drives the motive for the girls to be prepared. And then in verse 4, again, just to emphasize this, the prudent girls are defined by their preparedness. And again, this is kind of what I'm getting at. Our grip on the future must be stronger than our grasp on the present. We are very present-minded as Americans. We just, you can go either way with this. You could say we just don't have a real good historical sense of where we've been, and therefore how history drives future decisions. In the same regard as Christians, we don't have a sense of how eschatology should be driving some urgency in our lives. It's really just about living for the present. Our grip on the future must be stronger, or at least as strong as our grasp on the present. By the way, some people, just a little interpretive kind of issue, some people have said oil, when the image of oil is used, what does oil represent? Oil represents the Holy Spirit. I'm not going to buy that argument, and I hear some people that will just, every time they see oil, that means the Holy Spirit. I don't think we can kind of micro-interpret some of these parables. And by the way, what would that mean if oil were the Holy Spirit? What would that mean in this parable?
They could go out.
Yeah. Because all 10 of the girls have a little bit of oil. It's not like some have oil and some don't. It's that some don't have enough of the Holy Spirit. And the Holy Spirit is going to run out. Oh no, I ran out of the Holy Spirit. That's a big problem. I remember. I remember at Moody, there was someone I knew that was a little more of a it's kind of a broader school. It's not like a denominational thing. So someone of a little more of a charismatic bent, which is fine. But they wanted to start kind of a prayer ministry, which is very cool. I thought that was good. But the sign they put up was, come to, this room at such and such a date and pray for more of the Holy Spirit. And I didn't really get that. And I actually talked to the person, what do you mean buy that. I didn't get a really clear... It's a funny way to put it. And these were plastered all over campus. That's what... pray for more of the Spirit's influence. Pray for more yieldedness to the Spirit. That's one thing. But pray for more of the Holy Spirit. We got to be careful with how we describe
Pray more of God.
Pray for more of God. Pray for more of God's influence. There's a dozen other things, a dozen other ways you could word it. I didn't quite get that specifically what this person was trying to say. So I'm not trying to be critical. I am saying, especially when it comes to our pneumatology, our understanding of the role of the Holy Spirit in the life of the Christian, which, by the way, because of the charismatic movement at the beginning of the 1900s, we've just kind of run screaming away from pneumatology, because if anybody talks about the Holy Spirit, it's as though we overreact. Because of all the emphasis of the charismatic movement on the Holy Spirit, now most believers don't have a real good understanding of the Holy Spirit. Because we don't talk about the Holy Spirit as though he's a taboo subject or something like that. That's one area in particularly where I think we really need to be careful in how we're describing the role of the Holy Spirit in our lives, and try to be as biblical as possible. That was a tangent. I'm getting back onto the text now, but that was fun. It's good. So I don't think when they're talking about oil, it has anything to do with the Holy Spirit. I think that's, that's just something as we go through parables, it's good to touch on every once in a while and see where sometimes we read a little too much into this. So we've looked at the anticipation. Something changes in verse 5. A new kind of an idea is introduced in verse 5, and I'm just going to call this the delay. So verses 5 through 9. Now, while the bridegroom was delaying, so that's the context for this next couple of verses, they all got drowsy and began to sleep. But at midnight there was a shout, "Behold, the bridegroom! Come out to meet him!" Then all those virgins rose and trimmed their lamps. The foolish said to the prudent, "Give us some of your oil, for our lamps are going out." But the prudent answered, "No, there will not be enough for us and you also, you too. Go instead to the dealers and buy some for yourselves." So the unique element that is inserted here in verse 5, and it's not unique to that custom. Sometimes there was a delay. You might not know why, but the specific issue that is inserted into this story is the delay of the bridegroom. You expect the bridegroom at a certain time. There's a range there. You get a sense that he's going to come this particular evening, which he does. It's just not exactly at the time we thought he would be coming. In fact, it's quite a bit later. But that's the element that is slipped in here, the unanticipated delay of the groom. The word for to delay is chronizo, from which we get the word chronos, chronometer, chronological. He was spending time in time. There was time. There was all kinds of time. He was delaying. He was taking too much time. So it's kind of an interesting word that they would use there. He was delaying with too much time. So therefore they all got drowsy and began to sleep. Now, which ones got drowsy and slept? The 5 foolish ones or the 5 wise virgins? They all got drowsy and slept. Okay, so this isn't just one group or the other. In fact, you wonder if it's the whole party there. They're all waiting. It's late in the night, and apparently you would get to the point where it's so late you just assume that the bridegroom would come the next day, early in the morning or something like that. And you don't know why. You have no idea, and no reason for the delay is mentioned, by the way. Didn't say, well, I got, my horse ran out of gas and I had to, there's no
text messages explaining.
Yeah, you think you can text ahead and give some reason. There's no reason, and it's interesting to note in some of these parables what is missing. And that's, the reason for his delay is irrelevant. Because the focus of this is him coming and us being ready. Why? It's his time frame. It's God's sovereign time frame. But the fact is that they all got drowsy, began to sleep. We put a little note in there. Sleep I think we talked about this for one of the other parables. It may or it may not